Today, I want to talk about how to find the job that you're suited for, but not necessarily the job that you desire or that you want. So, my entire life, I wanted to be a writer. And I have written some things. I've written probably three and a half books, and I will put a link below to my most recent book. But really, what I want to talk about is how I found the job that I currently have. And I think it's kind of an interesting conversation because I imagine most people kind of go through life the same way and they don't necessarily know what they want to do. They don't even necessarily know what they're good at, but eventually they turn up into something that can be a pretty good career or at least a good job that they can be proud of having. So when I first started my journey towards finding a job, I went to university and I was good at science. And so I studied biology. Originally, I wanted to be a microbiologist. I was really interested in that movie Outbreak, and I loved viruses and diseases and bacteria and stuff like that. So I did want to learn about how to do that. And so I did study that at university, but my second year at university I had this class. It was called deterministic microbiology, I believe. And in that course, we had to identify different bacteria. So we'd be given a sample of a bacteria, and we had to do various tests on it to figure out which bacteria it was. And like doing the tests, that was fun. I like doing that. But we also had to remember the names, the Latinized names of these bacteria. And I have a sort of learning disability. I have some kind of dyslexia, let's say. And learning nouns has always been difficult for me, but it's especially difficult to learn Latinized names of bacteria, really long words that are complicated and hard to pronounce. And that basically destroyed my possibility of pursuing microbiology. Like, I guess I could have figured it out, but it was just like that class just destroyed my confidence in being able to pursue that career. So I eventually switched into just a general sort of biology. Actually, I chose the program that would allow me to take the most electives that weren't necessarily science related, but just I liked philosophy. And so I wanted to take courses on that. And so I just chose a program that would allow me to take the most number of courses possible that were electives. After pursuing biology, general biology for 2 years, I almost switched into psychology. This was probably partially because of my interest in philosophy. It kind of was leading to these ideas about psychology. Maybe psychology would be a more appropriate avenue for me to study. But my dad advised that I should just graduate university and get on with my life. And so I didn't change my degree and I just graduated. After I graduated, I had a biology degree. I had an honors bachelor's in biology, which sounds nice, I guess, and it's a STEM career or it's a STEM degree. But it was basically useless because no one wants a scientist who's not having a master's or a PhD. And so I searched for jobs in science, but I couldn't find anything. The closest I got was pest control. I remember the recruiter was like, well, they love that you have a science degree. They think that would be really useful for this work. It wouldn't be. So I took this really crappy job in a call center. I really had no idea what I was doing. So I just took this job because it was the easiest job to get. It was a job that was available. And I was not good at it because it required customer service. It required being friendly and kind to people on the telephone. And I just didn't really care at all. So I was really bad at that job. At about that time, my cousin was living in Korea. He was an English teacher in Korea, and he recommended that, why don't you come and be an English teacher in Korea? It's really easy to get a job here, and you can use this time to sort of figure out what you want to do with your life. And so I took his advice, and I contacted the person he got me in touch with. Almost right away, I had a job, and so I did the necessary work to get there. And I moved to Korea, and I was an English teacher for about a year. And while I was there, I had this idea that I wanted to be a lawyer because, everyone thinks you should be a lawyer. A lawyer is like a reputable position to have. It's a good job to have. People like lawyers. They get paid lots of money or whatever. And so I thought, okay, I could be a lawyer too. So I started studying for the LSAT, which is a test that you need to do to get into law school. I studied for that as much as I could. And I took the test one day in Seoul, Korea. So that wasn't where I lived, but I traveled one night. And then the next day I did the test in the morning. And afterwards, I got my score, and I didn't do very great. I didn't do very good. Probably part of it was my difficulties with language that I mentioned earlier. I just wasn't really good at reading at the speed that you need to read at to be able to do well in that test. So after that, applied to law, and I got on a wait list at the worst law school in Canada. So that was not a very good thing. But I also thought, maybe I want to build websites, and probably websites was something that I should have done all along. because when I had first wanted to go to university, my dad told me that I should study IT or technology because I was good at computers. I'd always been good at computers, but my logic or reasoning was I don't want to work with computers. I don't want to work on a computer all day. That sounds awful. So I also applied to go to college to do a web development program, and I applied for that. And I did get into that program, and it was near where my mom lived. So I could easily do that program. I didn't need a lot of money because I could live at home and I could commute to work or I could commute to school, and my tuition wasn't very much money. So I signed up for that, and that is what I committed. I went to school and I did that for 2 years. I was pretty good at school actually, because I was curious. I liked doing it. It was fun for me. I actually built a couple of these like sort of mini startup projects. So while I was there, I made one that was for memes. We got decently popular. I made another social network, but that one kind of just lived in secret, because it was too complicated about how to like convince people that it was a good idea to use my social network and opposed to theirs. And this was like at the peak of all the other social networks. So there was really hard. It would be really hard for me, some random person from the middle of nowhere, to compete with like Facebook and Instagram and all those companies. And when I graduated, I landed a job at a startup because I was really into startups. I was really into technology and new companies with new ideas, building new products. And so I found this job with a startup and I was really excited about it. And I worked at that startup. And one of the first things I realized while working there was that like the code that you learn about at school and the code that actually becomes the products or the code that becomes a major website is way different, way more complicated, messy, difficult to understand and difficult to code in and make sense of, especially when you haven't like learned the frameworks that are being used and no one is really ready or willing to teach you how to use this framework that they're using. And so I ultimately failed at that job. I got laid off, but really I wasn't up to the level that they needed me to be at, I guess, for the company. Although the company was kind of sketchy in a lot of ways. They were trying to make money off of microtransactions and they had millions of dollars of debt, and I don't even think they exist anymore. So after getting laid off, I was kind of devastated. I didn't know what to do with my life again. And I applied for various different jobs at different IT companies and web development companies. And eventually I did find another job at an IT company that was making websites for a bank. And so I took that job and I worked there for 3 years. And in about 3 years, my boss told me, he said, there's this new technology or this requirement that's coming out. It's called accessibility. And I need you to learn how to do it. And so I had no idea what this accessibility stuff was, but I took it on and I started to learn how to do it. And eventually I got, decent at it. I did lots of trainings on it. I went to conferences and I just sort of really dug into it and learned how to do it and got decent at it. After probably 2 years of learning it at that company, I wanted to find a job that I was doing accessibility specifically, where I would be able to focus on that. So I searched for another job and I eventually found a job at the national broadcaster in my country. And at that place, I was going to get to do accessibility full time. So my full time job was going to be accessibility. And so I did that. I did that for almost 5 years, I think. And I just got better and better at my skills. But I was getting boring. The challenges were kind of running out, and you can only do so much work and you can only have so much influence on a group of people. I feel like this just happens is that like you can do what you can do and you can be motivated to change things and you can fight or feel resistance for a certain amount of time. And then you kind of realize, okay, it's time for me to move on and try to, influence somewhere else where maybe they're a little bit more willing to be influenced or whatever. And so I moved on to another company. This company was a lot bigger company, and they had more challenges. They had more interesting things to work on. And I took that job on, and it's a good job. It's a good job. It's a reputable company. I am challenged at this work. I think I'm pretty good at it. And so this is the job that I have. And so that is sort of my convoluted path to becoming a web accessibility specialist. Again, like originally when I was first, thinking about what kind of jobs I wanted to do, I did not want to do IT. I did not want to do technology, even though my dad had suggested I should do that. When I first got into doing web internet stuff, I didn't even know that there was a such thing as web accessibility. And if my boss at the time had not told me that I was going to be the person responsible for it and the person necessary to do the job, then I would not have done this work at all. And so I guess like the idea here is that you don't necessarily know where you're going, but you pursue the tasks that you're good at. You listen to the suggestions of the people who guide you along the way, and you develop the skills that suit you or that you're good at and that you can do a good job with. And that's how I found my career. And I imagine lots of people have these sort of random careers that they go through and they don't really know what they're doing, but they just fall into something and they end up being good at it. And then that's what they do for a job. And so I've been doing this now for like 10 years. It's a long time, I would say. And I'm pretty good, I guess. I've spoken at conferences about this. I have a certification. I belong to a group or a certification for my industry. And so these are all just like these things that have happened and come into place or fallen into order along the way without me necessarily, pursuing it or knowing that's my destination. And that's kind of how I fell into the career that I have. I thought it was an interesting story a little bit about like how we get to where we're going to be or how we end up with the jobs that we have. And that's how I found my job. Yeah, even though it's not necessarily the job that I wanted, it is a job. It does pay the bills, and it helps provide for my family. So in that sense, it's a good job. And I still want to be a writer. I still try and be a writer. I still write. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to make money being a writer. And again, if you are curious about what I wrote, there will be a link in the description below. But anyways, that's just my story about how I found my career. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Click that like button and subscribe. And hopefully we will talk again sometime soon. Goodbye.